Hello and welcome. Well, did you know that women are the first to file for divorce in nearly 80% of the cases? These women are not walking away lightly. They feel they have done everything humanly possible to save the marriage right before they throw in the towel. And many times, their husbands are caught unaware. They are blindsided. Well, listen in today as Tim Wade, a relationship coach for men, shares the work he does to defuse the divorce time bomb when she wants out. This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee, proudly brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. And I'm your host, Lisa McCluskey. And before we start, please help this podcast grow by subscribing and sharing with your friends. Also, I want to hear from you. Please leave comments in the comments section or feel free to email me at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com. Also, join our Facebook and Instagram pages at Silver Divorce Podcast. And now, let's podcast. So today, as I said, I am so pleased to be joined by Tim Wade. He is the founder of Tim Wade Coaching and Lion-Hearted Living. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to start this topic because usually we're speaking about the women. And this time we are going to talk about the work that you do with men. So that's
awesome. Thank you for having me here.
No, I am so pleased you're here. So before we jump in, can you share how you came to focus on helping men?
Absolutely. I started and got interested in men's work back in 1992 when a gentleman named Robert Bly had written a book called Iron John. It was very popular, and I read it and thought, this is amazing. I've never heard anything like this. And so I started to get interested in that. That movement kind of rose and fell over time, and I went into other things and other interests. Flash forward to 2010, which was after the big economy crash. I left my career in film and television and became a life coach.
Wow.
And I was still interested in men's work, in particular, men being the best version of themselves they can be and really be a contribution and maybe even overcome some of the negative aspects that masculinity has presented over this, centuries. And that's where I really started, was starting to talk to men about, what does it mean to up-level?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, how long you got?
I think we're going to get into that, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in depth a little bit. And but it is really about can you show up as a fully integrated whole man? My Lion-Hearted Living is really the tagline for my coaching business, because I believe that being lion-hearted means being courageous and compassionate, and that those two things aren't mutually exclusive, and that vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength.
Do you feel like we're starting to see more talk about that in the community of men, more talk about that, where people who are raising kids to be men are starting to tune in more to that concept?
I think so. There was a time period when it went, kind of the pendulum swing went towards a very, very soft kind of masculinity, very almost you call it sort of feminine masculinity in a way. And now I think it's starting to come back to some homeostasis. that you can be both and. In other words, you can have a masculine strength and all sorts of different qualities like that, but still be, tender, like tough and tender at the same time. And I'm very excited about that conversation in particular, that it's a both and, not an either or.
Yeah, it seems as though I've seen more about that lately. And I'm glad to hear that the pendulum is swinging, because ultimately that will help marriages in the long term.
I hope so.
Yeah. So you had your own story of divorce, and I think you said that played into your work as well. Would you share that with our listeners?
Absolutely. After I became a life coach, and then also a business coach and a marketing coach and several other kinds of coaches, in 2015, my wife of 27 years sat me down and said, I am not happy. I'm, in fact, miserable, and I don't want to do this anymore. And as you said in the introduction, I was blindsided. It's not that I thought everything was perfect, but I had no idea that it had come to such a tipping point. Mm-hmm. And she has also been a coach for 2 decades now. And so my first thought was, well, can we get counseling? Can we do anything? And she said, no, it's I'm beyond that. It's time for us to separate. Well, that was the most painful thing I'd ever gone through in my life. But I made one promise to myself, and I said it out loud to my best friend, and I said, no matter what happens, and no matter how this turns out, I'm going to become a better man. And that one promise, that one declaration, if you want to call it, made all the difference, and what led me into working with men who were in marriage crisis as I was going through my own divorce. And by the way, we did it about as amicably as you could imagine. If there's such a thing as a good divorce, we had one. And other guys started asking me, how did you do that? You guys seem to still get along really well. In fact, sometimes I was asked after we got divorced, are you sure you're really divorced? And so I started answering their questions, and little by little started coaching men who were in a downward spiral in their relationship.
Wow. It's another wonderful example of how going through something that is so traumatic ends up shaping the future of your career, and you're able to help so many other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you can I tell you the end of the Cinderella story?
Yeah, do, please.
Well, we've been divorced for 8 years. And about a year ago, after spending a lot of time co-parenting and learning how to be friends again, and learning how to appreciate each other and all the things that we had lost sight of, we're actually back together.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is a Cinderella story.
It is. It doesn't happen for everyone. And I have a business partner. We work together with men, and he said, that's so awesome. And I kind of knew it might happen. He said, however, the 8-year reconciliation plan probably won't be a big seller.
No.
And I say, well, we're a little slow, I think, and thick-headed.
That's a definition of playing the long game.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So the last episode, I interviewed Demetrius and Emily, and they had been married 12 years. And very similar situation. And actually now they've been married, I think, 27. But they came to a point where she said, I am unhappy and I don't want to continue this anymore. And he was blindsided. So they had a great story of how they finally found each other again and continued on. Although they never formally divorced, they actually separated in the house. So it is possible. And so I'm really encouraged to share some of your knowledge with the listeners. So many people out there are struggling and trying to decide what to do. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Walkaway Wife, as you refer to them, and help help us to get a picture of what is that woman's life like?
Yes, I did not coin the term walkaway wife. There are a couple psychologists who work with divorcing couples to help them perhaps not divorce, and they had been studying this phenomenon that had happened in not too pretty recently. This idea that a woman starts becoming uncomfortable, unhappy, discontent, restless, and wonders whether or not is this all there is? And it often happens in the late 40s. Sometimes it coincides with perimenopause. It certainly often coincides with having had children, maybe even starting to move into empty nest. And the women look at their lives and say, I don't know if this is what I want for the next 3 decades. This doesn't seem to be what I dreamed of. And as is common with humans, they look around and think, what's the problem? Oh, I think maybe it's him.
It's that guy.
It's that guy that's sitting over there on the couch. And, that's very a human thing to do. And sure, I haven't met a couple yet where it wasn't both who contributed to the tipping point, but the woman herself starts to measure: am I happy? Am I not? And more, the answer is I'm not.
It's interesting that coincides with the empty nest, because it seems as though part of it is they lose their identity and they lose their self. It's like we've been caring for others for so long, and as the kids are leaving, they look around and there's nobody to care for anymore to the same extent. And they haven't,
absolutely,
they haven't paid attention to themselves. So this is the first time where, the house is quiet. It's just the two of you trying to decide, what to do every day.
Yes, and the relationship itself has come to a place where, the man was raised a lot, still in a very traditional way, even in the 21st century, of, okay, I'm the provider and protector. I go to work, I make money, put food on the table, all that kind of stuff. And, often the wife does the same thing. But he may kind of think like, and then that's what I do. That's it. And so I have to say that, I love my gender, but we can be a little bit obtuse sometimes and not understand that a relationship takes a lot more than just being business partners, so to speak, in the raising of children and keeping the home. The other thing is the communication that men and women have with each other can be very different. And I spoke to a woman once and asked her, well, what did your husband know what was going on? And she said, no, he didn't seem to have any idea. And I said, well, did you tell him? And she said, well, I hinted a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how did that work? She goes, not very well, it turns out. And I said, yeah. I said, we're kind of very directly focused at human beings.
Right, and I think, too, women tend to communicate emotionally. And they tend to wait until they bottle it up until they're at that tipping point. And when they communicate, it's based on emotions, where men tend to see things in a logical format, more black and white. They see it as, oh, she's upset I didn't put the dishes away. And she's thinking in the back of her mind, it's a much larger issue than that. Is 100%. That? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a man will also kind of be like, well, things aren't great, but I'll just kind of keep my head down and keep plowing forward, and we'll get through it. And it's a bit of the, get it done sort of thing, stay the course, but with blinders on.
Mm-hmm. We've been married a long time. I can see that where, well, we've been married a long time. It'll be fine. We'll work through this. And then they don't realize that she's in such an extreme state of unhappiness. She's about ready to throw in the towel. So, how long, in your experience, how long do women stay in this state of I'm not happy, but I'm not quite ready to do something about it before they actually do pull the trigger?
Surprisingly, it's usually around 2 years before
Wow.
they get there. And it starts slowly. Like I said, taking the temperature of the relationship, like, am I happy? Am I not? Is this good? Is this what I want? Almost daily. And when I ask men, when do you think this started, all of this, when they really look into it, they say, oh, 18 months, no, maybe 2 years, maybe a little longer. And they're very surprised that it's been that long. Of course, their wife is not surprised at all. And, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of thought and a lot of struggle and even misery to make a decision, for a woman to make a decision like this.
Yeah.
It's not, it may seem to the man like it's capricious in some way. It's like, oh, you know what? Let's get divorced.
Right.
And
And she's thinking about upending the family, and also maybe there's some financial considerations. How am I going to live? She's trying to work all of that out in her head. Well,
absolutely.
yeah.
And say, there's a pretty popular book called Should I Stay or Should I Go?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very popular with women because they are weighing those two things, like, too good to leave, too bad to stay. What do I do? What do I do? Because for the most part, with some notable exceptions, they still love their husband.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody stands at the altar and says, it would be great, in about 25 years, let's get divorced. How about that be our plan?
Right.
No, nobody wants this. This is not what you dreamed of.
No, you dream of marriages forever. Yeah.
And it'll
then,
be a fairy tale.
right. And people change over time too. Circumstances change, and but that woman has so many factors to consider because finances is a large part of it. It's, in great divorce especially, I read that women experience on average a 46% decrease in their standard of living. So not that somebody would stay for money, but how am I going to live is the overarching question.
Right. Which is interesting because this idea of the walkaway wife is a fairly new concept in that after the 60s and the women's liberation movement and all that, and a lot of changes, not enough yet, but a lot, women have more options now. There was a time when, first of all, you had to ask for a divorce from your husband. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I read that in the early 70s, a woman couldn't have a credit card without
That's
having
right.
a male co-signer. I grew up in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 60s. It's like, that's crazy. So I can see why at this point a woman can have a career and have their own income, and it's also not a stigma the way it used to be.
Yeah, that's true. It
And
isn't.
so the good news is that you don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. You're not forced to do that. The bad news is that pay equality and all that is still needs to be improved, and it's still a struggle. And it's a struggle for men too, because they go, well, there goes half my pension, there goes half my 401k, there goes half. I have to sell the house and split that.
And for this audience, we're talking gray divorce, so many of them are over the age of 50, and it's harder to secure a job. Maybe you've been out of the workforce for a little bit, or it's been decades since you completed your degree. They have a harder time finding something at that age. So that weighs on them heavily. And then there's the, do I want to be alone? People think, gosh, if I divorce at 60, I'll never find a man again, or I'll never find love again because I'm just too old. So that weighs on them as well. So many factors to think about before.
I did read a curious statistic that said that men tend to get re-involved in a relationship more quickly after divorce, kind of indicating that women are a bit more self-reliant. And I also read that men who aren't in a relationship die younger. So
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
we're kind of like, we don't get along well on our
No,
own 100%.
no, I read too that it's like somewhere upwards of 80% of men will remarry within 5 years after a divorce. So it is they can't navigate as well on their own. And for women, sometimes I wonder, and I said this myself, it's like I raised one man, I'm not going to raise another.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so there's all that. Well, then let's talk about the husband because you spend a lot of time helping men who, when they're hit with that divorce time bomb, how can they diffuse it if they want to keep their marriage? So, what is the typical reaction when a man is hit with, "I'm not happy. I want a divorce"?
They are stunned mostly at first, and they usually move into what I call damage control mode, which is, I got to fix this as fast as possible. And they try to undo years of unhappiness in a few days. And it's a panic. Their hair's on fire. They're in free fall. They don't know what to do. And that is actually the state in which most men find me and my community, is that. And so their reaction is usually to go into begging, pleading, promising, gestures, romantic gestures. Here's 50 roses. Does that fix it?
Oh, they want it fixed fast.
Oh, yeah, because it's so painful.
Yeah.
It really is, and it's terrifying to be rejected and feel like, uh-oh, everything I worked for, everything I thought would be is falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the reaction. Unfortunately, it is exactly the worst thing to do.
So what do you say they should do then if a man is hit like that?
What we tell them is that they have to slow down, take a few deep breaths, and know that they don't and they can't fix this thing in 24 hours. And if they try, they will push their wife further away as quickly as possible. She'll be out the door because, well, you said it, Lisa. I raised one man. I'm tired of raising this guy, you know.
Yeah, the thought that occurred to me was, don't become a simpering fool.
Yeah, or a little boy.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's a regression to a hurt little boy who wants it all to be better, and that reaction isn't. Two things happen. One is that little boys throw tantrums.
Right.
So that happens. And it triggers this maternal instinct in a woman, which is awesome when it's related to a child. When it's related to your spouse, it's about as repulsive as you can imagine.
Yeah.
My ex-wife, former ex-wife, there's no word for that. My former ex. What do you call your partner when I just call her my beloved now.
There you go. I like that.
And she said, "Tim, you've been acting like a little boy, and I don't want to sleep with a little boy."
Good for her.
Yeah, that was that. Ow. Ow.
Yeah.
That hurt. She was right. She was absolutely right. And that was, her being that blunt with me helped me.
Right.
And now I get to be blunt with other men and say, okay, here's the deal, dude. Stop it. She wants to understand that you are not, what did you say, a simpering fool.
Right.
And instead that you could step up and be the kind of man she can trust, the kind of man she can count on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the meat of the work that I do with men, is how to stop being like a hummingbird. We call them hummingbird husbands. They're flying around. You know how hummingbirds are. They're very nervous.
Yes.
And they ask things like, "Are we okay? What's going on? What are you thinking? What are you doing?" And instead they become. I live in the Rocky Mountains area, And so we have a lot of mountain lions, and mountain lions are kind of calm most of the time, actually. They lay on a rock, and they're like, I'm good. Everything's good. Their little cubs come and pull in their ears and stuff, and they're like, yeah, it's all right. And if they have to go out and, protect their pride or whatever you call them, they will. So we use that metaphor. It's like, be more like a mountain lion. Be calmer. Be a calming, safe presence, not a frenetic, crazy man.
Right. I would think it would push the woman away more if they become a frenetic, overbearing, wanting to be by their side every minute of the day. That would just make me nuts. So.
Oh yeah, and basically it's like, you see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what the woman thinks.
Yeah.
This is it right now. This is what I don't like. This is why I'm where I am in this process.
So do you find that if a man truly seeks some additional help, that the relationship can be saved? Or do you think it's too late? By the time the woman spent 2 years planning her escape, it's just too late?
I'm glad to say that I've watched a lot of reconciliations. I wish there were more, because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just way too... She's already got 2 feet out the door, and to never, return. But there are, like my story and other men in my community, that absolutely, over time, and it does take some time, they can rebuild trust, the friendship, connection. And we always tell them, this is not about rebuilding your old relationship. You don't want to go back to that. You want, a form of marriage 2.0.
Yeah, you want a new relationship based on how much you both have changed and what you both want going forward.
Absolutely.
Right? Especially when you're talking about having been married for 30 years. How you were when you were 19 or 20 is drastically different than how you are when you're
And
50.
I should hope so.
Yeah. So you would want different things out of the relationship.
Yeah, and I don't, I don't want to go back to being 19 again.
No, it's too hard.
No, thanks.
Exactly. Yeah, that's encouraging to hear, though. There is a possibility for it to be saved, even if the woman has been in this state of agony for a couple of years.
One gentleman I think of in particular, his name is Jim, and he came into our program, and he was in his mid-70s. And he, in the process of working with us, he did eventually get divorced. And then about a year went by or so, or 2 years, and they got remarried. He proposed to her again, and she said yes, because he had become the kind of man that she could respect and cherish.
Wow, that's a great story.
Got an injury that just can't wait? There's no need to delay your care. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is excited to announce that our Urgent Ortho Walk-In Clinic is now available on Saturdays at the Gun Barrel Road location. Open from 8 to noon, we're here to treat sprains, strains, fractures, and more. No appointment needed. So skip the long ER wait and get specialized orthopedic care fast. Visit us this Saturday at Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics Urgent Ortho. We're the center for expert care right when you need it. Learn more at sportmed.com.
So you talk about playing the long game. Is that an example of playing the long game? And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, the long game is the antidote to this frenetic, I got to fix it right now. This has to happen right this minute or yesterday, that this has to change and fix and be okay. Just make it okay, no matter what. Instead, to realize that it took you a while to get here, to where you're at, and it's going to take some time to get out of that. You hiked into a forest that got darker and darker and darker, and now you want to hike out. Well, you can't just do that at the snap of a finger. It's going to take work. It's going to take patience is a huge factor. So playing the long game is really about being patient, and each day you get a chance to improve things a little bit, to pay into what I call the bank of goodwill between you and your spouse. It's amazing to me that when you really boil it down, people want to be together because they enjoy and they feel good when they're with the other person, when they're interacting with them or when they're partnering with them. And unfortunately, life and stress and all sorts of things, our own, problems, start to bring the joy of the marriage down into a hole, And so rebuilding that takes time when you realize that it only takes a little gesture to create connection.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's more about creating the new life how you see as, I don't want to say ideal marriage, but it really kind of is. What's the new life you want to create that results in what you consider to be the ideal marriage?
Yes, and that's one of the things I do with men is there's 3 questions they need to be able to answer in a deep and meaningful way. The first one is, who am I? Which means, what are my values? What do I stand for, no matter what? The second is, what do I want? Right? And what do I want means, what kind of relationship do I want? What is the experience of life I want? What are the qualities of it, not what are the things? And then the last one is, where am I going? Do I have a vision, a North Star for where I would like to take my life? And ideally invite this woman that I love along, like, come, let's do this. Let's walk together. And I was told, you don't seem to know where we're going. Our family, us as a couple, you're just kind of moving forward. And again, she was right.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a man catches a vision of, this is what I think we can create, and paints that picture with optimism, now that can be very inspiring, especially for a woman to say, okay, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's better than the future I was absolutely worrying would come true.
Yeah, so do you think women are looking for their husbands to take that lead?
I think that leadership is a role that both spouses can have in different ways. Mm-hmm. But men, we're kind of wired to be more proactive in, like, moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, women have their absolutely awesome things they do that we could never even fathom doing. But our focus, our monofocus, in a way, helps us, kind of pierce the world and move through it if we are awake and conscious, we can do it in a very productive way. So when a man, suddenly realizes, I tell my client, says, the next time she asks you where you want to go to dinner, have an answer.
That's great.
I don't care. Where do you want to go? It's like, from her side of the street, she goes, another decision I have to make, really?
Right.
Like, could you just add anything to the conversation here?
Yeah. And the women they're always expected to be the planner. Yeah.
And the man is thinking he's being, easygoing.
Right.
And that he's, and instead it's like, no. And then the man will say, well, yeah, but if I say, how about pizza? And she says, no, I don't feel like pizza. Well, why did you ask?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think, here's what you need to, and there's so much to be learned from, the other gender. And men learning that, look, first of all, have an answer, have a backup answer, and don't be attached to any of them as this or nothing else. It becomes a partnership. Not only that, many women tell me that they like to, when they see the choices, it's easier for them to choose and say, oh, yeah, that's what I want,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to just nothing.
Yeah, it is interesting. I read that you said you have to worry if your wife is no longer nagging you. And that's a red flag. If your wife's no longer nagging you and she's not working to improve the relationship and everything is just, it's fine, then those are some red flags. Would you talk about that a little bit? If you're a guy and you might be wondering, oh, is my wife and is she planning her exit? What are some of those red flags?
Great question. And you're right. Sometimes there's been conflict in the marriage, and all of a sudden it seems to go away, seems to dissipate. She's no longer, as you say, nagging or trying to, get you to do something or be that. She said, and men will think, hey, I think things have turned around. Everything's good now. Oh boy. Talk about the calm before the storm. And then that's part of why they're blindsided a lot of times, is because it's like, well, I thought everything was okay. What they were experiencing, though, was detachment.
Yeah.
Was the woman has finally given up and said, I've tried everything I can, I think. I can't do this anymore, and he's never going to change. Now, just to defend my men a little bit, it's understandable they would think that everything's okay, and it's not like this is a one-sided thing. When I say a woman feels like, I think I've done everything I can, I've done everything I can, I'm exhausted, I'm exasperated. The thing is, if they're not getting any help with things, they're also kind of operating in the dark. Mm-hmm. That's right. So nagging makes a man angry. The woman thinks, I'm just trying to get him to see and understand me. And so if I nag him to take out the trash, that's not about the trash. It's about, can't you understand what's important to me? And why? And so that red flag is one of them. It doesn't always happen, the calm before the storm. Another one is, have you become ships that pass in the night? Is your life become so busy that you really don't have very much time to even interact? Children take up a lot of time and energy, obviously, and if you realize that you should never. I tell my guys, you never stop dating your wife. I don't care how long you've been married. You've got to make time for, and be the one again. Be proactive. You've probably abdicated any social planning whatsoever to your wife, who does it really well, by the way. So it's easy to say, hey, go ahead and do that. And I didn't want to do it anyway, so that's great. Well, one of the things that's, I think, necessary to keep a marriage alive is variety, a little bit of surprise, and even mystery. Yes, security and safety is extremely important, but Tony Robbins says there are 6 basic human needs, and the first 2 are, one is safety and one is novelty. Mm-hmm. And they seem like they're opposites, and they kind of are, but they live together. So if a man says, hey, what you doing Friday night? She says, well, nothing, I don't think. And, well, be ready by 6 p.m., and wear something awesome. Ooh.
Wow.
What's that about? What's going on? Right?
Intrigue,
yeah. Now it's like, and then have something special planned, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be a big, the fanciest restaurant in town. Could be a picnic,
right.
Whatever. The point is that you are saying to her, I see you. I know what you like, and I want to do something that will light you up.
Yeah. It says, I care about you enough to make an effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're not making that effort, you're on your way. You're on your way down, probably.
As you were talking, I was thinking, busyness is really avoidance. So
yes.
if I'm going to make myself so busy, I'm really just trying to avoid you.
And what happens usually, the things that go first, well, sex usually goes pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But even on a larger scale, intimacy in any way starts to wane. Now we're talking about affection and just sharing laughs together, and anything that creates connection starts to get less and less and less and less, and you get into a rut and a routine. And so if you can, break the routine, then you might have a chance of shaking things up a little bit and going, hey, just because we're senior citizens doesn't mean we're old.
Right. Old people still have sex.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and a man will start to get angry because that's been not as good as he would like, or non-existent. And it's like, once again, yeah, how do you think that's going to fix things, being angry? Because everyone wants to be around an angry man.
Right.
Not.
That kind of plays into then her thought of you as he's just an angry old man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't want to be with him.
It's a spiral.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's another thing about that. After the bomb gets dropped, one of the hardest things for men to do is to have the desire to rebuild, a new relationship, and to have the respect for their partner to let them go. Because what I tell them is, I say, you're angry and you're hurt, and you think she's doing the wrong thing, but you're not seeing how hard this decision was, how long it took, and how would you like it if you were the one wanting to, where you've come to the decision that this is the only choice left. And if your partner said, all they were is telling you in every way possible, not just verbally, that you're wrong and you're bad and you're going to ruin the family and hurt the kids and all of this, is that the type of person you would want to lean back in towards?
Probably not.
No. Like, oh, you think I'm an awful person. Come on, give me a hug.
Right.
It's like, no. And this is one of the hardest things in the world, is to have compassion, empathy, and understanding for someone who is doing something that you wish they wouldn't do.
Well, especially if you haven't been trained to be that way, right? Because most men aren't brought up to be that, or weren't, in the boomer generation, it was the stoic personality.
Well, absolutely. I would say, look, these are things your dad didn't teach you. My dad didn't teach me. His dad didn't teach him, and on and on.
Yeah.
That I believe is part of, my, if you want to call it a crusade, I don't know it's quite that intense, but yeah, I want to change things one person at a time that says, this doesn't have to be like this, especially you don't have to wait. If you could see some of the warning signs of disconnection in your relationship, maybe long before that 2-year ticking time clock goes off, you could start turning that Titanic, away from the iceberg.
Yeah, gosh, we sure hope so, because the trauma that comes with divorce and how it changes lives, and so many people that wish they have regrets, or they wish they had known sooner. It's really staggering how often that happens. And as you talked, I thought so much of this just comes down to communication. We do not know how to have open conversations at all.
Yeah, and that would be my, if I had advice for the women listening today, that is, as men, we tend to be more direct. We can be avoidant too, obviously, but in terms of communication, we can, simpler is better, even if you fear that there might be a bad reaction. The idea of hinting doesn't work, obviously.
Yeah.
Or speaking, as you said, you can speak with your emotions and say, this is how I feel, but sometimes you have to explain that to a man a little more in depth. Whereas, because men don't get raised with emotional intelligence,
Right.
sadly. For the most part, we're talking generalities, right?
Right.
And so many men say, if I had only known this 6 months ago, if I had only learned this 2 years ago, there's a lot of regret, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, sit them down. Speak very plainly.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait until you've made your exit plan and it's an emotional conversation, because it does start.
I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You end
Right.
up enacting your exit plan after all.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Yep, that's the worst that can happen. So don't be afraid to communicate. And that was one thing I referenced Emily and Demetrius. That's what it came down to, is sitting down and talking, communicating openly, and finding their way to being friends again.
Yes.
Huge.
And the friendship comes through connection and rapport. The thing about communication is that it is not a panacea in and of itself. I mean, you can communicate very poorly. I used to communicate just how angry I was with my wife. I was great at it. That's, so if the communication is loving communication that comes from a sense of connection being, I really see this person. I don't see them as the enemy. I see them as my partner. I see them as maybe another human being who is in pain, which is why they're acting and saying some things that I don't like. But I ask men to see through, and I would ask women to do the same thing. See through the outward reaction, if you can, and with compassion think, he's really hurting, actually. Because anger is always a cover for more vulnerable emotions,
Mm-hmm.
like shame and hurt and sorrow and fear of rejection and all of that. And if you can see that and then have a conversation from that place, it'll be a completely different thing.
Listening to understand.
Yep.
What it comes
Yep.
down to. That's great. Well, it's been very deep and very helpful to start to understand the dynamics between the women who walk away and the men who are just simply blindsided. So thank you for that. And I wanted to ask, in all your years of working with men, is there a story besides yours? Your story is very inspiring, or a story that particularly moved you?
One of them was the one I mentioned about Jim, who remarried his ex-wife. There have been several men, one in particular, that it took him working very diligently with his Walkaway Wife to really become the man he always wanted to be. And I watched him go through so many iterations and growth and never give up. He never gave up, but he didn't pressure her. And little by little, she came around and said to him, "Wow, who is this man standing in front of me? I think I'm falling back in love with you.
Wow.
And I cannot thank you enough." Now, that doesn't mean that she didn't also have things she had to do in her own life, in her own, inner work. She did. But him not pressuring her and instead turning back to himself and doing what he needed to do for himself gave her the space to do what she needed to do and for them to find each other again. And like you said, they became friends first, which is my story too.
Mm-hmm.
Friends again. Maybe I should write a book called Friends Again.
Right. Yes.
And so that inspired me to watch him be so diligent. And he told me, he said, "Well, isn't that what you did?" And I said, "Okay." I'm glad I could have been of service.
Oh, what a great compliment. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it really was.
That really is. And, it also points to what you said about it takes time. Don't expect it to happen overnight. And if the people that are really committed to making that time work for them, it works. So.
And if you can be outcome independent about it, we always tell guys, you're going to do this work whether or not you ever get back together or not. You need to do this work for you.
Yeah.
And if you have this continuing thing in the back of your head that you're doing this in order to impress her, woo her back, win her over, all of that, she knows you're doing it for that.
Right. Yeah. And ultimately it will make them a better, if it doesn't work out with their current marriage, it will make them a better partner going forward.
And there are stories like that in my community where they have found love. And I would say that the majority of the guys that I work with are over 50 at least.
Oh, okay.
And they found love.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear. So, and that has to be inspiring.
It is.
So what else,
Very
what
much.
is inspiring you today?
Oh, that's a great question. What's inspiring me is that there is more and more room for men in particular to do this kind of work. And when I started into it, 8 years ago or so, 9 years ago, there was very little to offer men. And now there's a lot more. So much so that one thing I'm inspired by is that a couple other coaches and I are doing a summit in Colorado this coming year in May, which will be for men and women who help men become better men.
Oh, I love that.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're calling it the Big Tent Summit because we want it to be a gathering place that is very inclusive. And it's because the truth is, us coaches who work with men, we operate in our own little silos a lot. We don't gather and support each other. So we decided it's high time that there be more opportunities for this to be an actual movement, not just a individual crusade. So I'm inspired by that.
Yeah, it is inspiring to think that we now as a society recognize this, and there are more resources that men can turn to. And actually also I think about, like, my daughter is raising two men, and that she can turn to help them be better future husbands. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find it.
And you ladies, you're really good at gathering together and helping each other.
Oh, yes.
We're learning from you, saying, hey.
We've been doing it from the dawn of time.
Exactly. And it's like, we could do that, maybe. Could we?
Well, y'all are slow learners, but you're getting there.
Oh, I know. We're like golden retrievers.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, thank you for joining me today. Would you please share how our listeners can get in touch with you, your social media and website?
Absolutely. The website is timwadecoaching.com. And we have I run an online course that's self-paced called How to Diffuse the Divorce Bomb. That's for men. And it's at howtodifusethedivorcebomb.com. And those are the two best ways to really find me. I don't have a huge social media presence at this time. It's probably maybe time to do that.
Well, I did see some of your YouTube videos, so I do know you're on YouTube as well.
I am.
Yes.
And more to come.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It really, I hope this helps the people out there who are the women who might be thinking of walking away, shed some light for the men who are wondering. Maybe they see some red flags and know that there is some help for them as well. And for our listeners, oh, go ahead.
It's been my pleasure, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. For our listeners, please join me on the next episode of the Silver Divorce Podcast. And before I go, please leave us a rating and a review. That is so important to grow our podcast and also to attract great guests like Tim. So this podcast is brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or are newly in the divorce process, we'll help you on your journey and tell you things your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce is one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.